Oh my, I've got a 2080 Ti now, and I thought I could hold out until Christmas 2021 or so to upgrade, but seeing that this card has nearly doubled the frames per second, that's a pretty big deal. And, there were a lot of people that decided that they had to jump on Ampere or RDNA 2 because this would assuredly be one of the biggest performance increases of their lifetime. And so it's time to stop waiting, even if they already had a powerful card. Well, except that this isn't a quote from a 2080 Ti review. It's a quote from a 1080 Ti review and someone who had a 980 Ti. And, that's because, well, there's been big performance increases in the past. Pascal was a bigger performance increase over Maxwell than Ampere has been over Turing. And Turing really wasn't a slouch. I feel like lately I've seen a lot of misconceptions about where performance will be going over the next few years, especially from people who dismiss how much more powerful a Pro Xbox or PlayStation 5 could be in 2023 or 2024. And well, there were a lot of videos I was considering doing. I actually thought maybe I'd just do a summary of a bunch of mini leaks for this week's video, but once I got some tidbits about RDNA 4, I thought it was time not just to tell you guys where we're going to be in a few years, but put everything in perspective so you can at least look at the big picture clearly when you see prices going up compared to where performance is going as well. So let's just get into these RDNA updates right now, shall we? Now, before I get into RDNA 4, I'm actually going to start somewhat re-summarizing, if you will, RDNA 3 information. Now, most of this is really unchanged from what I confirmed in recent videos, especially that Lovelace leak, but it's important for the overall scope of this video, so let's just get into that first. RDNA 3 was always targeting a greater than 50% boost over the 6900 XT. So that is something I've been saying for quite a while, that, well, I am not convinced of the more ridiculous claims about RDNA 3 performance. Anyone who thinks this is like some Turing-esque performance boost, that's just flat out wrong. AMD always, as far as years ago, was targeting a bigger boost than that. And at this point, in fact, I am confident confirming it will increase performance by 60% over the 6900 XT at a minimum. And though I am not going to double down on it yet, I do have multiple proven sources saying that people should expect it to roughly double the 6900 XT. But you have to remember, this is still very early. They cannot say for sure where it will hit. Could it be a bit above 100%? Sure. But I don't know. For now, I kind of tentatively tell people to expect around an 80 to a 100% increase. But really, roughly double is all I can say. And yeah, it'll be more efficient. It'll have better ray tracing, but also expect top power usage for that top model to be quite a bit higher than before. And this comes directly from within AMD. They are going to push this thing hard. Now, people need to remember that theoretical top performance and real-world performance are not the same thing. This is something that me and Daniel Nenny will talk about heavily in one portion of the upcoming Broken Silicon. Look out for that. But what you see in early simulations during R&D inside AMD is not what will actually be in the final product that's manufactured with silicon and packaged and then requires cooling. AMD themselves, people within AMD, do not know what top performance they will hit. They know it's theoretically possible, but they know they'll never hit the theoretical top performance. So I will continue to express caution over some of the more wilder claims I see some rumor websites sharing. It's worth mentioning that the organization of the chiplets in the lead model has changed multiple times over the last few years. That's a reason why I'm not doubling down on the overall final specs, that I know for a fact that they've changed the overall organization multiple times, even recently, and that this is no different than RDNA 2, confirmed by Andy at Hot Chips. I really recommend that presentation where he openly states that AMD was simulating and trying different memory and size configurations before they landed on the final design. I would not be surprised if some of the things people are leaking are just not what the actual final design ends up being. And although I will say this, getting Vcache working in a mass manufacturable way radically improved the confidence behind RDNA 3's top performance. You see, RDNA 3X or Navi 3X, if you will, they were sure a while ago they'd be able to hit that. But now that they are getting their cache systems working far better, and working on bringing out new types of cache, that's made them pretty confident they can go far above 50%. And actually, Andy answered a question regarding this in that Hot Chips presentation I've already referenced.
Well, I'm sure you understand that I can't talk about future products. You know, from a broad scheme of things, as I stated in the presentation, right, whenever we embark on a new design, we go back and we have to revisit all of these areas. You know, how are we going to get the throughput of the core? How are we going to get bandwidth delivery to the core? So you can, you know, the memory interface and the types of memory available will always be a piece of that. You know, and what we've done with the Infinity Cache, we've introduced another piece and another part in our toolkit to deliver that what we would target as being the most optimal balance of those things. So I can't say that there's a particular area of focus, you know, and obviously I can't talk about exactly what's going to happen in future products, but you know, we develop these technologies and they all form part of our toolkit for future hardware.
So yeah, again, I highly recommend that presentation, and as you can see right there, they're not just going to do more of the same. New ways of utilizing cache to enhance bandwidth is going to be essential for RDNA 3 and then, of course, RDNA 4. Now, another thing that I've said before that I will say again, the Radeon 7000 lineup is going to increase pricing by almost an entire tier. Per tier is what I've been told from a source, and all sources say it's just going to be more expensive than before, despite massively increasing performance again. So we'll get into what I think about that later in the video. And yeah, it's going to launch Q3 or 4 next year. Now, the thing you probably are excited to see information about that was in the thumbnail, RDNA 4. Early RDNA 4 performance estimates place it as at least as big as Ampere over Turing, with one source saying that me throwing around the idea of at least 50% is a conservative estimate. It should have a faster turnaround time than RDNA 3, which, if you think about it, RDNA 3 is basically coming out almost exactly 2 years after RDNA 2. The current launch estimate is either the very end of 2023 with some sort of paper launch or early 2024. And for now, I'm going to refrain from disclosing what I am told is the current design. And that's because I know it's going to change. There's no point in saying it this early, but there's plenty of rumors, and I've already said what I believe RDNA 2's configuration is in other videos. You can go watch those and then realize that a couple years later there will be newer nodes and probably new cache and, of course, an increase in the amount of chiplets. And the reason also is I've just been literally told not to, because sometimes people share things with me that I'm allowed to share, but then they say, if you share this piece, well, it could hurt our competitiveness. There's a reason I haven't talked about Sierra Forest for Intel yet, by the way. So yeah, like I said in the title of this video, it's just an early whisper, but I believe it's one of the most important ones, and that's a stab at what performance you can expect and roughly when it's coming out. And I believe the greater discussion needs to be around really hammering home that performance is going to keep rapidly increasing for graphics every couple years, even if the price is also rapidly increasing, at least in my opinion. So I want to put this in perspective now then, what this means and why, I don't know, things might not be as bad as you think they will be with prices going up so much. You know, I've already talked about how, and this is a direct quote, AMD is considering putting $2,000 as the top price point for RDNA 3. You know, why that sucks that it's not going to be the same price, but at the same time, well, let's go into it. I want to put past and future performance in perspective. All right, and before I go through the actual chart, there are some things I want to summarize very quickly here. So what you're going to see is rough performance levels organized by tiers, and these are fairly substantial tier increases if you think about it, like 60 to 90. You know, that's, even though I say around, if it was literally 60 to 90, that's a 50% performance increase. So each tier and graphics card, I skip over plenty of cards in each generation. It's really to be thought of as like a 30 to 50% performance increase. It's like a very noticeable increase in performance. And I start at below 60 hertz because most people game below 60 hertz. Everyone needs to understand that. Most people do, but as long as you're above 30, I would say it's playable. And 60 is considered solid, and then it gets smoother. And eventually, I do believe that 120 hertz is going to be a new gold standard like what 60 was about 10 years ago. You already have an iPhone that has a 120 hertz display, and you're starting to see even non-gaming content get shot at this resolution. So I believe that will be the long-term gold standard, and I believe eventually 480 hertz is probably where things will just about stop in a similar way to 8K. Can you see above 8K? It's debatable, and I understand that people don't see in pixels and they don't see in frame rates, but I think 480 hertz, once you hit that, that's where it's going to be like, all right, some people can't tell the difference anymore, or the overwhelming majority of people can't. Otherwise, that's what you got to remember, in addition to the fact that I try to use graphics cards from 1 year. That's why you won't see a 1080 Ti in the chart. I technically want to talk about Pascal from 2016, but then every now and then I actually do have to throw in a low-end card that came out the year after it's shown because, well, the low-end comes out later or frankly doesn't even come out anymore. And yeah, there's a 3050 Ti in here. I know it's only in laptops, but I'm confident a higher clock desktop version will be around a 2060. And the most important thing to confirm and state here, RDNA 3 and RDNA 4 in these columns, these are very rough estimates. Do not quote the naming, the exact performance, or the pricing. This is my stab based on, well, informed information, discussions with people inside AMD, but no, this isn't like me doubling down on exactly where everything's going to be. I'm just saying this is where it could be, so we can have a greater discussion. And yeah, I think if RDNA 3 doubles performance, they're going to add a 950 XT. They're not going to stop at the 900 XT, but that's complete speculation on my part. Again, don't take that as fact. Now, let us get into putting things into perspective. Yeah, I mean, at first there was a $1,200, not $99. They wanted that extra dollar, $1,200 Titan flagship, and a $700. Remember, that was the founder's pricing at launch before they dropped the price for Vega. So that's where you really wouldn't have 4K 60 in every game, but it could kind of do it if you turn down some settings with the 1080. The Titan was really the first card, I'd say, to really give you 4K 60 gaming, although no, it wasn't as stable as current 4K 60 cards. And then 2 years later, we go to Turing. So Turing gives you another performance increase that just barely gets you to a higher tier for this chart, but, well, it did. And this gets you to not 4K 120, but to 4K 90-ish frames per second, closer to like 4K 85. And let's move on to Ampere, which of course I put in red letters the MSRPs of the Ampere cards because God knows that's not what almost anyone's getting these for. But look, I have to do it for apples to apples. Just bear with me here. So then you look at the 3070. What was previously $1,200, 2 years later, now around $500. Or at the very least, we can say half the price it was before, even with, well, some scalper pricing. And then we go down to the 6600 XT, which really is about 2080 performance, and that's less than half the price. And the 3090, though more expensive than the 2080 Ti, was a full tier better. Better in performance than it increased price, even if it wasn't that much better. It was. And that's really the trend that we need to think about when we move on to what's coming out from RDNA 3 and RDNA 4 years later, because I'm only going to show RDNA 3 because, frankly, I'm a little less convinced at the top Lovelace performance so far. But, you can expect Lovelace to not be crazy worse, like at least 80% the performance of RDNA 3, if not close. And, yeah, so let's put things in perspective now. Let's say this almost doubles performance over the 3090 or the 6900 XT, and then they charge double the price. Well, yeah, it's not great, and they might increase the price of the 7800 XT as well, but it's going to bring you performance quite a bit higher than the 3090, well being cheaper than the 3090. And yeah, I think they're going to ramp up the price of the 7700 XT over the 6700 XT. But again, technically AMD will be able to say, hey, it's 3090 performance for less than half the price, and so on and so forth down the product stack. Yes, I believe they'll bring this to 400. I've already talked about how AMD wants to kill the sub $400 market, and this is just slowly getting there. And then if we move on to RDNA 4, I don't know, let's say it increases performance. I think here I basically assume it was a 75% increase. Yep, I think they'll increase the price again. And but they'll also bring you 2 more tiers of performance. Yes, maybe the 8700 XT is $700, but it's also, let's zoom out here and actually finally look at that performance tier comparison there. So if we actually zoom out, here's an argument I want to make that I don't think enough people are thinking about. Will it suck if an 8500 XT is $400? I guess. I wish it was cheaper. I always wish everything was cheaper, though. But if that gets you 4K 120 gaming, will people complain? Yes, I don't think the 700 XT class should be $700. I don't. I'm openly saying I don't. But if that brings you 4K 240 performance, will anyone complain? And I'm confident RDNA 3 will be a bigger performance increase than Ampere over Turing, and RDNA 4 will be at least an Ampere level increase over RDNA 3. Do the math yourself. Take something that's, let's say it's 90% better than the 3090. Multiply it by that. Assume this is 80% this performance. This is the performance level you get to. And this is something I kind of want to talk about today, right? I do believe they'll eventually want to remove the entire sub $300 market and replace it with APUs. But, if an APU is a fifth the performance of the top card, you're looking at something that, even if games get harder to run, I'm sure will do at least 1440p 60 gaming. Will anyone complain? You see, I'm just not so sure people will. I know a lot of people will, but again, does anyone need 8K? If a $500 card is bringing you 4K 120 gaming, well, I understand it could have been cheaper, but I don't know. I think that's something not enough people have talked about. And so there you go. I've told you a few whispers about RDNA 4, reconfirmed some things about RDNA 3, and then the greater point of this video, tried to drive home, well, the overall perspective of what this market could start to look like, both the good and the bad. You see, I see a lot of people saying they're buying an RTX 3090 right now to future-proof, and hey, look, I'm sure an RTX 4090 will be able to run AAA games at, for good 4K frame rates for a very long time, but it depends what you mean by future-proofing. If you look at even just past performance increases that I am sure will be smaller than what we're about to see. I believe the performance increases every 2 years are going to be bigger than what they were the past decade because of how much AMD is now firing on all cylinders and how much NVIDIA will keep competing with them. I've got to just say then that you can say the 3090 will always be a good 4K gaming card and be capable of high frame rates at that resolution, but you've also got to keep in mind that in 3 years, maybe 4 years, it's going to be a low-end card. And so it just depends how you look at it. It's always going to game well. Someone with a Titan Maxwell is still gaming fine, but it's pretty much low-end performance now. And it might feel a little silly if you've got this 400-watt low-end card sitting there in a few years. Maybe not. You'll probably have already upgraded and sold it to pay for part of that upgrade if you're someone who can afford a 3090. But if you're not, put that in perspective. I do not believe that games getting harder to run is going to outpace this. I believe we're kind of at the uncanny valley, and we're going to see devs really focus on just doubling frame rates and making the performance smooth at the image quality we have now for the time being, and that it's going to be probably about 5 or 6 years before we really see them try to really double down on full ray tracing and photorealism. For now, I think prices will be allowed to go up by consumers because the performance they have, they're just happy with. And yeah, so that was the main thing I wanted to talk about in this video. It's funny, I was actually going to make this kind of one of those a bunch of little leaks videos that I do occasionally. I was going to talk about PS5 stuff, Xbox stuff, some NVIDIA whispers, but really the RDNA 4 tidbit that I eventually got really set me looking at future and past pricing and made the bulk of this video. I've got a big Intel Arc video coming that really looks at more of the lineup and what you can expect, but I don't feel it's quite ready, so I decided to do this video you're seeing here today first. But the thing I want to touch on about it is, well, correcting something. Some information circulating about, some internal Intel slides showing comparisons of Arc to the competition. Now, from what I can gather talking to some of my sources, this information is all correct, but it seems to be abstracted from a different slide, that whoever leaked this recompiled it in a new slide so as to not give away where the information came from, and that's always a good idea, honestly. That's why I don't really ever show internal slides, because you're just going to get people in trouble when you didn't need to do that to show the information. But I have been seeing a lot of websites talk about how, the top model competes with around a 3070 or 6700 XT, and that's consistent with what I've leaked about DG2, but also that this SoC2 must be some, 256 or 384 execution unit model. I don't know how many times I've got to say this, guys. I know what other people have leaked, but I'm the one who's leaked pictures of these cards first, and estimated the die size and shown off or talked about XE super sampling. So I don't know. If you trust the stuff that I've been leaking that's already been pretty much all correct, I also need to remind everyone that I keep saying they're testing the 128 execution unit model next to the top model. I believe most likely that SOT2 right there is actually the smallest die that they will launch next to it, probably with 4 gigabytes of VRAM, and that I don't believe it will actually be a 1650 Super in performance. I'm not convinced yet, but I do believe it will beat the 1650 non-Super, which is actually quite a bit weaker, by the way, than the 1650 Super. But in all fairness, Intel's design will be able to do ray tracing unlike the 1650 Super. That's the class Intel's trying to bring to like the sub $200 market right there. A ray tracing capable between 1650 and 1650 Super card while using less energy. It's not the 256 model. This is the tiniest die that they're planning to flood into the low end. And so, yeah, look out for that ARC leak, but I wanted to correct that now. And that's going to just about do it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you bear with me there when I try to put things in perspective. I know there will be some people that are like, oh, he says all this crazy stuff. It's like, no, I just put the names of RDNA 3 and RDNA 4 cards so we could talk about what we can expect. That's not me confirming that. But yeah, hopefully you enjoyed it. If you did, please subscribe to the Moore's Law is Dead YouTube channel. Ring the bell button so you don't miss that upcoming ARC leak or the upcoming Broken Silicon episode with Daniel Nenny. An excellent talk at when shortages will end and what a crash will look like, in addition to NVIDIA buying ARM. And remember that, yeah, if you support me and Gerard and Dan on Patreon, you get access to that episode early without ads, can ask guests like him questions for free, join the Discord and talk with me after this video comes out, and, well, so much more extra content only the patrons get. We really couldn't do it without them. So, yeah, thank you to them. But no matter who you are, thank you for watching.